Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 2025 RPFF Emerging Directors Pitch Competition intro session. We are working this year in partnership with CBC Short Docs, which we are so lucky and privileged to be able to do. My name is Sarah-tai Black, and I'm the Manager of Programming here at RPFF. We have two prestigious guests from CBC joining us this morning, and I will let them introduce themselves now and tell you a little bit about what they do at CBC.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Lucius Dechausay, and I am a production executive here with the CBC Docs team. I specifically manage short docs. That's my portfolio. And so for anyone who is looking to make, short documentaries, this is the place to go. And I'm here with my lovely colleague, SJ.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Choi. I work in the business and rights team at CBC. We handle the legal and the budget side of things. Once a project is greenlit for development, the project is handed to me afterwards, and then I negotiate the development agreement and figure out the budget before the project goes into the development pipeline. So, yeah. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Lovely. Thank you both so much for joining us on a Tuesday morning to talk business and rights and making films. To kind of begin with, I wanted to offer a short overview of this year's pitch competition and the guidelines for applying, as the nature of the EDP competition does change from year to year. So if you saw our competition last year, things are going to be really different from this year. So this year there's going to be a single winner who will win an amazing development deal with CBC Short Docs alongside a generous prize package of production and post-production resources from some of our generous industry partners, pardon me. I also want to acknowledge that this info session applies only to this year's Emerging Directors Pitch Competition at Regent Park Film Festival. This doesn't apply to pitching any projects directly to CBC. That is a very different thing. We're not part of that, so these guidelines are not for that. If you do want to look over any of the information that we're going to cover here today, you can, of course, find it on our website, rpff.ca/EDP. It's linked here in this document that's being shared. And FYI, our EDP applications are currently open. They're open, and they close Sunday, September 14th at 11:59 p.m. You can find the application form on our website, rpff.ca as well. And lastly, before we really get started, if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and some of our RPFF staff members will collate them for us to answer during the Q&A portion at the end of the session. Lovely. Let's begin. Next slide. First, I want to touch on some of the eligibility requirements for the competition. First off, we have filmmaker eligibility. Unfortunately, for this year, you must be a Canadian citizen or have permanent resident status in Canada. Emerging and mid-career directors, in the case of this application, are defined as having directed or produced no more than 3 films for festivals or for broadcast. If you are David Cronenberg, you cannot apply to this. If you are anyone who is very established and you have a full career, this is not for you. This is for emerging folks. Maybe if you're a little past emerging, those are the folks we want to support. As well, if you are selected, you really must commit to coming to our virtual pitch training session, which will be held in the first week of November, as well as one virtual development deal training workshop, which will be led by CBC, and that'll be happening in the 3rd or final week of October. And lastly, of course, you must commit to an in-person 5-minute live pitch, which will take place during RPFF's festival on Friday, November 28th. If you're unable to make any of those dates, unfortunately, we can't consider your application because they are obviously, the pitch competition itself is crucial, but also those training workshops are instrumental in terms of shepherding you down the path towards a development deal at CBC. And lastly, permanent CBC employees are not eligible to apply. Tom Powers, if you're in here, get out. You can't apply. We don't want you to apply. We also have some eligibility requirements in terms of any potential pitch project. If we could go to the next slide, please. The winning pitch should factor in time for development before production would ideally begin. This means if you have a pitch idea that centers a subject, a human being that you want to center your project around, but you know they're going to leave the country in 2 weeks, that's probably not a great project to pitch. It kind of has to be something that can withstand the test of a little bit of time so you can go through the process of development and then hopefully into production. The pitch should also be for a short documentary film of 12 to 25 minutes in length. And projects with existing distribution commitments are ineligible. Again, we really want to be supporting emerging and mid-career filmmakers. If you're a big guy, this isn't the place for you. You probably aren't even here because you have money. So we're all about sharing resources with folks who don't have them. Likewise, selected finalists cannot pitch the same project at another festival program or any kind of like awarding program. So if you have submitted it to another festival and you want to continue on with the EDP at RPFF, you unfortunately would have to withdraw that pitch from other festivals. And lastly, any selected finalists will be required to sign CBC's standard submission release form. That's just basic admin. There's also a few more things to keep in mind for this year's festival, for this year's competition, pardon me. If we can go to the next slide, please. So during the pitch competition, if you've never taken part in a pitch competition before, or you've never seen how the EDP works at RPFF, finalists will have 5 minutes to pitch their project to a panel of experts, which will include 2 CBC executives who will ask questions, they'll provide feedback, and they'll also select the winning project that night. So you're coming into it ready to pitch and hopefully ready to win that night and receive your possible money and prize package and move forward with the development deal. It's I know it might sound scary to folks who have never done a pitch competition before, but it's a really supportive place. And we've been really lucky to have really empathetic and knowledgeable industry experts take part in the past and continuing this year. Again, I'm going to reiterate this because it's so important. If you are selected as a finalist, you really must attend the 2 virtual training sessions before the EDP competition in November. This is where you learn how to hone your pitching skills, you master the art of selling your project, and you're also going to learn the ins and outs of a development deal at CBC Short Docs. So if you're someone who is hoping to pitch your project, but you maybe don't have the full experience of having done a pitch in the past, that's totally fine. We're here to teach you and support you through that. But again, it is mandatory to attend these virtual training sessions. And lastly, of course, if you are unfamiliar with RPFF, we have similar mandates for this competition in terms of encouraging submissions by filmmakers from historically marginalized communities, and as well as pitches that feature these communities. So if you're going to make a documentary about Tim Cook, this is maybe not the place. If, you know, this is a place where we want to see the demographics of Regent Park represented on screen. So that is something to really keep in mind. And let's chat a bit about development at CBC. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we really want to reiterate that development is not an instant green light, but instead it's this paid writing and research period that you're going to be using to build out the creative materials of your documentary. So if you win the pitch competition, you're not going to go straight into production. You're going to go into development, and it's very much like a work in progress process. And during this time, CBC will ask you for things like a fuller treatment, a budget, a demo, things like that to kind of finalize your pitch package. And that'll give you and CBC a chance to identify any challenges you're going to have, any opportunities you might be able to take advantage of, as well as the needs of your film before production begins. It's a really, really crucial period to kind of shepherd your idea from a live pitch towards a world premiere. And now I will pass to Lucius, who can talk a lot more eloquently about development at CBC than I can.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really crucial period. I think that it's, if you think back to the times when, you were making your first films, the amount of time that you put into thinking about that project, into building out the logistics of that project, into gathering your team, all of those things. And so you don't just, show up the next day and with a camera and try and figure it out. It gives you an opportunity to actually like plan it out. And that whole process creatively is also, in collaboration with me, who will ask a lot of questions and, make sure that all of the details of the film creatively are sort of thought through. You'll also be working with people like SJ and SJ. Do you want to talk a little bit about, when people are coming in for development, how they would interact with business and rights?
Sure. Yeah, once the project is greenlit for development by the creative team, by Lucius, um, we get the initial budget. That's kind of signed off by the creative team, but there are more details to hash out. So we will discuss the budget with you and figure out the details. There are certain like costs that we don't include in development budgets, like legal costs and stuff like that. So we can figure out the details as once the project is greenlit for development, and then you will get to sign the CBC development agreement, which gives CBC the right to develop the show, and then gives us the option to greenlight it for production if we want to bring it to the production pipeline. So yeah, so we will be negotiating the development agreement, and then yeah, once the development agreement is signed, you will begin the development process creatively.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Next, I'm going to give kind of a brief overview of CBC short docs, and then, of course, let the CBC team take the reins, because what do I know? I don't work at CBC. So if we could go to the next slide, please. My Wizard of Oz helper in the background. Again, this information is on the EDP application and website. So if you want to look it over yourself at a later time, just go to rpff.ca/EDP. So if you're not familiar with CBC short docs and the kind of work that they platform, they are, of course, an award-winning series of original documentaries for CBC Gem and CBC's 2 YouTube channels that are CBC Docs and The Nature of Things. They're looking for new unscripted storytellers who use creative approaches, intimate access, and diverse cultural perspectives to tell you some of the best short stories that this country has to offer. I've put some examples of some of the short docs that are on the CBC Short Docs website and streaming on CBC Gem right now. My name is Tommy Lan Phat Trong, but Tommy Trong is actually an EDP alumnus. So you can kind of see a trajectory for you and the possibilities of that if you not even win. I don't believe that person won, but take part in the EDP competition. Love Lamo is also screening on CBC Gem. Love Lamo. My favorite part of Love Lamo is when Lamo, who is a very young autistic adult, talks about his friends pressuring him to drink and do drugs, and he goes, "No way, man." So those are the kind of humanist stories that CBC Short Docs is looking for. In terms of like a more detailed outline of the kind of projects that they're looking for, if we could go to the next slide, please. They're looking for personal stories. This means auteur-driven storytelling, which is to say something from a unique point of view. These are stories and projects that are meant for streaming audiences, and hopefully they come to us kind of through the eyes of a memorable character like Lemu, who will take us on a highly personable and relatable journey. They're also looking for cultural trends and hyper-local marvels. I would say this could be the Green Lady from New York, if you're familiar. If we have a Green Lady in Toronto, make a film about her. So this would be stories about a specific moment in recent history that, of course, speaks back to our current time right now, as well as stories that give us a unique snapshot of a time and place. You know, if you're kind of workshopping out what your place might be in this story ecosystem, it might be helpful to think about, you know, what are the stories that only you, only Regent Park filmmakers or in adjacent communities, what are the stories that you specifically can tell? And likewise, they're looking for stories that emphasize the changing times. You know, we love an underdog stories with a big character confronting a problem that seems almost bigger than themselves, whether that's personal or it's a systemic or institutional issue. As well as stories that highlight a person in a moment of transition as they're finding a joyful way forward or moving through something that is quite impactful. I will put a link in the chat that has this written down from the CBC website. My apologies. The link that I've just provided also has examples of films that hit all of these three categories. So you can kind of look through that later on your own if you wanted to see exactly what kind of films and film types they're talking about. Can we go to the next slide, please? Short Docs is also looking for projects that really emphasize and underscore storytelling, you know, and it should be said for something that is in collaboration with Regent Park Film Festival and the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, that these docs must have a Canadian connection and they must be relevant to a Canadian audience. We like stories that stay with us a bit longer after we watch them, stories that make us think differently, approach our relations to the world and each other differently. Things that are timely but still remain relevant in a year's time. You know, I think there's a lot of disposable media being made right now, and this is not the place for that. It's also great to kind of focus on a single unified narrative. This isn't really the place for broad surveys or like broad historical overviews. And likewise, you really want to ensure that your project is something that will resonate emotionally, something that will provoke conversation and offer solutions. And if not hope, then some sort of tool forward. And it's always important, find ways to use humor. Look at the world. It's not great. We need a little bit of humor to make it go down all right, you know? And lastly, you also want to emphasize style and production. You know, again, these short docs should aim to be 12 to 25 minutes in length. So they're a bit longer than the docs that we've had calls out for in the past. And likewise, your doc should reflect the real world in an original way. You know, use creative approaches, use fresh approaches to storytelling, to style, to visuals, music. And last but certainly not least, it should have a relatively short production turnaround time. You know, these docs should be able to be produced and released in under a year. And with that, I will pass it to Lucius once again to expand a little bit more again on the types of stories they're looking for and what the CBC short docs audience is like.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, everything is really character and story driven, you know, and so we really want to see these stories told through a really strong character, someone who we care about, someone who we love, someone who we want to see, get over the challenges or get over, the personal obstacle that they're facing within the film. That is going to be the unfolding story. And so, it's not just about a look back, it's really about, a present moment and look forward as well. So we're sort of incorporating all of that into the storytelling. And so there might be, parts of your story that you don't quite know yet. You might not know how it ends, but you should know the beginning. You should have a good idea of the middle. And the ability to understand what some of the possible outcomes of the end are. I really want to see your POV. What is your lived experience? What is your perspective on this? There's a lot of one thing I love about documentaries, especially with shorts, is that you can have 100 people working on the exact same topic, but they all are entirely different because, of the intersectionality of that lived experience and that perspective, and how that might add a richness here, a difference here. Short doc filmmakers are really experimental. And so, some of the pieces are entirely animated, some are speaking through a character that that we don't normally get to see the story of. Some are a little bit more archival based. They can all follow a bit of a different path, just whatever the best format to tell that story is. Access is important, we already, kicked out Tom Power and David Cronenberg out of the meeting. But if they were here and you want to make a documentary about them, you need to know them or know how to get to them. So, having access to your character. And so that's why I think, especially if you are emerging, sometimes people are like, I don't know what story to tell. And it's like the story that might be the best for you to tell, might be sitting across the table from you, might be a friend, it might be, a community that you, or like a place that you volunteer at. Like it might be, any of these places might spark some inspiration for some person that you would love to follow and share their story with a wider community. And the community for short docs is amazing. Like these films do really well. They've been viewed by millions and millions of people around the world. The filmmakers on this list are epic, folks who have like won South by Southwest and TIFF and Hot Docs and Canadian Screen Awards and also and Oscar shortlist. Like all across the board. It's just been really incredible. And so, if you want to look at different ways of making a film outside of, arts councils and those types of grants, like this competition is really incredible. It literally happens on that day in the moment, and no decision at any broadcaster has ever made that fast. Like it is a joy to be around. It is such a supportive community. And my goal, my dream, would be for the winner of this competition to then have their film programmed at Regent Park for the next year, so make something that will resonate with this community. um and last thing I'll say, because Sarah-tai mentioned it as well, but even for the folks who don't win, it doesn't mean that that's a door closed. It's actually also an open door. Last year when I was part of the competition, there were a number of projects that outside of the winner that also felt like they could have potential to be made. And so it's just a good thing to be a part of, for your career development, and just like more ties in the industry.
Yeah, it's a free crit. And critique doesn't come easy sometimes in this industry. Knowledgeable, informed, compassionate critique. Um, Next slide, please. Oh, I wonder who chose these pictures from the internet. It was me. Our executive director, Kalpana, was meant to be here to talk to you a bit more about our EDP prize package, but unfortunately she's not available today. But to give you kind of an idea of what our prize packages look like for this year, we're still confirming our sponsors. But last year, for example, the EDP winner received a $1,000 cash prize, a $500 cash prize, consultation and coaching from ACTRA Toronto, valued at $2,000, They also received advisory post-production in a theatrical mix suite for sound, for color, for visual effects, and deliverables from Post City Picture and Sound, which was valued at $7,000, as well as color grading services from the folks at Alter Ego Post, which is valued at $12,800. I'm still on some of the email threads with our winner from last year, and I can tell you that these services are very much being used, which is great for us to hear here at RPFF, because we really want to offer a prize package that is functional and usable and supports you and your work. And I believe that's our last slide. We can start in on our Q&As now. I have a few starter questions for our CBC team that might be some of the things the folks in the audience are thinking about. Tanya, would you mind no longer sharing the slideshow, please? To start us out, SJ and Lucius, do you have any tips to make a pitch stand out on paper? Are there any specific things that applicants should be including?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So, absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the biggest things to make your pitch stand out, I was talking about a little bit earlier, is that, many people, like you might have multiple people pitching the same topic or the same theme or the same, something similar in terms of a neighborhood. But your point of view, your perspective, how are you going to tell this differently than anyone else? How are you the one person who can tell this story? What is your unique point of view? Like, I would really love to see that. And also, if you are focusing on a character, you can give a little bit of a bio of that person, but it doesn't need to be a Wikipedia page. It's more like what are the things that I need to know about that person, but I really want to know more about what their story is. Like, what is the unfolding story? And so, spend time with your story, and what we're going to see over the course of the film.
What would be some helpful things for folks to include in a pitch deck? If folks have never made a pitch deck before, what would you advise they include in order to kind of convey the scope and the tone of their project?
You guys are so fancy. So, we love a good pitch deck. I always look at a pitch deck as, kind of like a mood board of your film. And so images that reflect your personal style or your tone or your take, on the piece, I think are always important. Not super long, I don't need a 70. If it takes me, 70 pages to understand what your short doc is about, that's too many pages. So 5 pages, 5 to 10 pages, is adequate. Give us a log line and a synopsis so that we understand what your story is. Tell us about your main character, your subject. Tell us about, what the story unfolding is going to be. You can give us a rundown of your director's vision or your POV, as I was mentioning. If you have a team already that you work with, you can add a team, but it's totally not necessary at this point. Like it can literally just come in through you. But if you have, collaborators that you normally work with or people that you love to work with, you can put them in. Um, sometimes we also put in a production timeline, and so this is just totally rough, but also gives everyone an idea of how long you imagine it'll take to make this documentary. So, we do try and, turn around our docs within around a year. Like that is kind of what we're looking at. But if you're like, okay, I'm really following this thing and it's going to take 7 years, like good to put down on paper and understand now, so that when we're having the conversation, you have an idea of that. And that's it really. I don't need a budget or anything like that at this stage. I really just want to know your idea, your perspective, your story, and sort of, who you're working with, or a little bit about you.
Mhm. In terms of folks having a team to work with or not having a team, I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about the kind of support that CBC provides during the development deal process. Like, will you be working directly with directors? Is the expectation that folks source their own producers and their own film team?
Yeah. So, the whole process of working with the CBC, I mean, I'm just going to speak personally, which obviously I always do, but I see every project as mentorship. So it doesn't matter if you are David Cronenberg, or, if you have never picked up a camera before. Like, I just see everything as mentorship, because every project is different and should be pushing you in a slightly different way, or to adopt, sort of new skill sets or new storytelling abilities. And so that can mean different things for everyone. So if you are someone who is, a director and you have a really good idea, come with that idea. Um, you will need a producer, or at least to adopt a producer's mind to work through the process. I'm someone who I've produced all of my own projects. But there's definitely, people who do not want that paperwork in their life. Like, they do not want it. So you have to understand, who you are as a creative from the beginning.
Yeah.
Uh, but I will help you, like, find the right teams to tell the story as well, so you don't have to come in with everything. But if you have ideas, we can also help make those connections. So if you're
Mhm.
like, oh my God, I always want to work with Sarah-tai, like, we can make that happen.
Mhm. Great. Any tips for what not to do?
Uh, don't don't just ChatGPT your pitch and send it in. Do write it, or write top line it. Don't You can be inspired by other projects, but don't just necessarily rip off another project. And I think really think about that access piece. And you know you can aim for the sky, but you really need to know that you have access to a certain story.
Mhm.
Again, that perspective and that lived experience, makes you the right person to tell that story.
Yes. We have a few questions in the chat. Some of these I can answer myself. First one being, how many finalists are there? About 4 to 5. I say about because as the person who reviews the submissions, I often tend to be benevolent and just add a couple more in because, for example, last year, which was my first year at RPFF and doing the EDP competition, I was just blown away by all the stories. So I'm someone, I tend to be generous in that regard. But I would say 4 to 5 finalists will be chosen approximately. It does get to a point where we're like, we can't do 6. Like, I have to cut myself off from being that benevolent. We have another question that says, do you have to be from Regent Park, or does the story have to focus on members from Regent Park? No, not at all. I mean, that would be great. We love to platform stories from Regent Park, of course. But there are issues that affect Regent Park residents that affect folks living in other communities. That short doc Love Lamo, for example, that I gave the example of previously. He's my neighbor. He lives in the building next to me here in St. Jamestown, which is a community that has a very similar demographic, very similar social issues. Um, so I would say if you're not immediately drawn to or have an established connection or relationship to Regent Park, it actually might not be a great idea to kind of be ethnographing Regent Park. But if you have a community that speaks to similar experiences or similar um, histories, that would certainly be welcomed as well. And we have some more questions. I might pass these to you, Lucius and SJ. This first one, perhaps for Lucius. Would an animated documentary reframing a historical event be considered?
Yeah, I mean, everything will be considered. Absolutely. And animation is a style that many of the filmmakers use, whether as part of the documentary or, in telling the entire visuals of the documentary.
Mhm. And two questions for SJ above my pay grade. I have an arts degree. I can't answer these questions. One, does CBC have exclusive distribution rights? And two, how do you treat IP ownership?
Okay, so I'll answer the second question first. So what you give to CBC, if you enter into a development agreement with CBC, what you give CBC is an option to develop and produce it, basically. So you enter into a development agreement with CBC, and you work together to develop it for a certain period of time. And then once the development is done, CBC gets 12 months to decide whether we're going to greenlight it for production or not. So if it goes into production, you will get to negotiate and sign a license agreement. So this license agreement is basically you giving CBC the right to exploit the finished film for a certain number of years in all platforms, usually just in Canada. The terms could vary a little bit depending on the project, but usually we do get rights to exploit the finished film for 10 years in Canada and any platforms. But again, this could vary depending on the project. And if you have like external funders, for example, from like the US, like we could negotiate in more detail. But that's the usual term that we start with within CBC. So after the license term is done, you are able to use the film with other, broadcasters, distributors. But within that 10-year license term, CBC will get the exclusive right to exploit the film within Canada. So that's I think that kind of answers both questions. Yeah.
And for the training session dates, is there an anticipated time frame? Not yet, but these CBC folks like to meet early. I will say that. I usually, because we have such a small pool of finalists relative to the applicants, especially for the pitch training session, which will be stewarded by RPFF, I like to do a doodle. I'm all about finding times that work best for everybody. So there is flexibility, at least in terms of the pitch training session timing and finding a time and day that works for you. I don't want to strike the fear in God in you that because these sessions are so mandatory that we're going to be steely-eyed and not making you be able to attend them. That's not the case. So we will try our best to make sure everyone's schedules and needs are incorporated, of course. We have a question here asking, how detailed and finalized of a budget are you looking for in the initial pitch deck? Can some of these aspects be projected?
Yeah, I mean, for your for your initial pitch deck, I wouldn't even worry about a budget at this point. Let's just focus on the idea and, we can work through that. That'll be part of the work in development.
And I know you just said, let's not worry about a budget, but I have another budget question for you. We have a question here that asks, is there a budget for hiring crew? And related, what's the budget range? Does CBC fund 100%?
So yes, there's a budget for hiring crew. And I'll say two different things here. And hopefully not too confusing. But for the development period, which is what we're focusing on right now, that's a smaller amount of money that'll be dedicated specifically for development. And some people do hire some crew. Like I said, if you are coming in as a director, Maybe you hire a producer that is just going to work on your production budget, you know? But most of the documents people are able to work on, without hiring at that point. Once you get to the larger, the greenlit production, absolutely. Like that's the whole point. You hire all the crew, all the positions, all the things to see that through.
Great, thank you. I know as someone with limited means myself, I would be asking those questions as well because I wouldn't want to get myself into something I might not be able to finish independently. So thank you for answering those questions. We have another question here that asks, for animation, do we need to hire animators or does CBC provide animators?
So especially for people who are working with animation, you know, again, that's sort of a depending on question. Most people have an idea already of, the style of animation or type of animator that they might want to be working with. So absolutely bring your animator, bring the people that you want to work with. If you do not, then absolutely. I started in the industry as an animator, and so I follow a lot of animators. That's work that we also love to do. We love looking at portfolios, looking at animations, and finding the right people to tell this story. But bring people. Yeah, there's no barriers around that at all.
Can this be a continuation from another project that the filmmaker has directed or worked on? I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens sometimes. I'm working on a project right now that is in development, and that's exactly the storyline. Because there's one character in the film whose life has continued to change and something interesting to follow. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Just to chime in on that question, so we want to make sure that the rights are free and clear. If we're continue, for example, like it's if the first project was distributed by another broadcaster or distributor, and they might have some rights associated with it, like right to distribute the sequel or something like that. So we want to make sure that it's clear for CBC to develop and use it. So yeah, it might be good to get legal opinions if that's the case, if there's any other third parties involved with the agreement for the first project.
Great, thank you, SJ. We just have a few more questions. This is a good question. Is being a temporary resident a complete deal breaker? What about if you're in the process / waiting for an answer on a permanent resident application?
Sorry, I'm just looking at the question. So, part of what we are bound by is, the CRTC rules, and so, every doc that we are creating, needs to get its CAPCO certification, which generally means that everyone needs to be Canadian, or at least your key creatives do. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yes, I would say also like use your best judgment of your situation. If you're waiting for an answer like next week, absolutely apply. But if it's something that's a bit more abstract, maybe defer to your own judgment or talk to folks who can kind of let you know what the timeline for that process looks like more definitively. If our project is not selected, will we be able to pitch it, produce it with a different organization? Of course, honey, this is your project. We don't own this unless you win. So yes, absolutely. I think that's one of the rewards of entering a competition like this, even if you don't win, is that you can continue to workshop it and build on it and have kind of resources and support in this process to kind of have it land more towards where you want it to land. And another question we have here is, do you support projects that have co-directors? For RPFF, this isn't a problem at all, but I will let Lucius speak on the ins and outs of that in regards to CBC short docs.
Not a problem at all, as long as you guys get along with each other.
No Beatles drama. Okay. Does anyone have any last questions before we close things up here? Okay. Tanya, my digital whisperer, would you mind putting the slideshow back up, please? So just some final reminders for folks. I know this has been a lot of information to digest. Again, I am underscoring because I'm so serious. You really have to be able to commit to these virtual pitch training session, the one virtual pitch training session, as well as the one virtual development deal session. And I hope it would go without saying that you do have to be here in person for the pitch competition itself on Friday, November 28th. A reminder that EDP applications close Sunday, September 14th at 11:59 p.m. As well, please submit your application according to the parameters that are outlined in the form, i.e. a single PDF file. As the person who goes through these applications first, that really is a help for me. I always worry about losing information from folks' applications because they've sent me 20 links, and that's just not an efficient way to get your project considered. So do yourself a kindness. One single PDF file. The parameters for that are within the application, but as a reminder, that single PDF would include your log line, your pitch, synopsis of your short, an artist statement outlining your inspiration and intentions, as well as links to past completed works or portfolio. Again, all of this information is available on the RPFF website and the EDP application form. Submissions will be shortlisted and contacted in late September if you're wondering about a time frame. And finally, just a reminder that if you do want to return to any of the information we've covered here today, you can find so much of it on our website. Again, rpff.ca/EDP. I see one last chat message from whomst. Oh, just a thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to our stellar CBC Short Docs and CBC Business and Rights team for joining us. What would we do without you? We're so thankful for your support and for your partnership this year.
Thank you. And I hope that everyone sends in your submissions and come out to the event. It's fun. It's so fun.
Agree. Okay, thank you, SJ. Thank you, Lucius, and thank you everyone for attending. See you in your pitch submissions. Bye.
Thank you so much. Good luck, everyone.